so much good stuff.
All right, guys. So first off, I want to thank you for taking the time out of the day and out of the schedule to allow me to do this. I know initially my in-service, was supposed to be TRX based, which it is. That's the initial portion. But based on kind of what I've learned practically through my internships here, both with Dina, I wanted to include just like a few more things, like dynamic core type stability stuff, primarily multiplanar. So my thought process presentation wise is to go through the exercises, explain them, leave room for questions, like where they can be applied. And then I was going to go into a little bit of literature that I have. So like 3 different studies, one on stroke, one on strength and conditioning, and one on rehab. And they're kind of all related to that multiplanar sling type training.
Do you want questions when we have them, or do you want us to hold it in?
When you have them. When you have them is perfect. So
famous last words.
Yeah. I know more is not to be able to resist.
I'm a question asker.
You're also a sit up the fronter.
I am, front row.
First row, exactly. All right, so the first one I have is kind of a variation of the traditional TRX and slider. So instead of going primarily in that kind of sagittal plane, I wanted to go more so into a little bit of rotation. So instead of coming right traditionally into that lunge here, what I was thinking is kind of having your face laterally, and then coming back just a tad, getting a stretch in the lat, working that spiral line, a little bit of oblique and transverse, and then coming up. So there's not much pull here. If there's a way in the future, maybe cutting and taking this off, possibility there, just a little bit more kind of activation there through the lat. So if you're coming here and then pulling with the right arm through, right?
So it can come back.
Exactly.
What's working the hardest
Let
right
me see
now?
do that.
Right now would be the quad. So I feel like with these kind of variations, the primary component and focus is the quad, but adding in these subtle little variations are going to
So
help.
after the quad is firing on you, so do it
Yes.
again, thank
Yeah.
you. Tell me, what do you feel now?
Lat stretch.
Lat stretch, as
Yep.
opposed to like your core trying to hold you together from not doing a banana split there?
Yeah, I mean that's
Okay.
definitely a component.
Okay.
And going back to the theory and kind of thought process of who is this applicable to, right? Someone in like the more geriatric type population, not as advanced level of a patient. Maybe just having them do kind of like a simple lunge and then pull here. Again, finding more effective kind of usage of this so that I can slide more. And what I mean by that is just the range of motion here is, that's all we can get out of it. So in the future, kind of finding something there, even taking it out here, getting a tad bit more. So it's the first one, right? So I have for target, quad strengthening, spiral and lateral line stretch, and then lat and transverse abdominis kind of focus. So then next exercise I have is the split squat with medial resistance band. So this is not a TRX one, but essentially my thought process behind this, similar to that paddle off press rotation or variation, is to resist knee valgus, and this is a direct kind of application to that. So you're forcing the knee here into valgus, and then via the lunge, right, coming here. I mean, depending on the level of the patient, come out even just a little bit more, get a little bit more tension, really focusing, right, keeping that knee out. And it's a tad bit difficult, but just a simple kind of progression there. And you can kind of pair this with the paddle off press that I'm gonna show later. That was a direct.
Did that hurt the knee?
I mean, not to a degree where I felt uncomfortable. It's noticeable. Maybe on a certain type of patient, it could be seen as more uncomfortable, depending on kind of their.
So you could use
specific.
that strap.
A broader band or something.
Yeah, you could just use the strap that goes with that right around the leg. That
Right.
would be.
Yeah.
You cut a band, exactly, place it around.
Yeah, that's ouch. Yeah. Okay.
So that was my thought with that. Next up, TRX Bulgarian split squat. So like I was talking about before, that baseline progression, right? Coming here. Now, my thought process is the first progression from that, right? So we're working with the pad.
Why is it Bulgarian and not Albanian?
That's, I think the Bulgarian method was like that high volume type training method for some sort of, whether it be bodybuilding or powerlifting, so they just named it
Would have been
Bulgarian.
the Russians in the Olympics, but go ahead.
Exactly, yeah.
Russians,
That
yeah.
precisely.
Never producible study.
Exactly.
I designed the whole thing myself.
Yeah.
Really, the weightlifting with the Bulgarians, well before I did this.
So, right, just increasing the demand on the quad a little bit more. So first progression here, grabbing the TRX, and instead of just solely coming straight up, right? If a patient has a little bit more trouble, tell them to use the arms, come a little bit forward, lean into that knee, keep pushing it out, and pull. And then on the eccentric portion, using the straps to control on the way down. So pretty simple concept. There's a few ways that it can be progressed as well. So I'm thinking with like a high level type patient, right? Adding the instability component, adding another foam pad here. I don't know how much this can be applied, but same kind of setup, right? Coming here, taking it slow, and coming back down, using the arms, and just having the quad stabilize throughout the range of motion.
I never think of these people I'm trying to train into like single leg squat things. I'll go like split squat and backward lunge. I never think of like your rear foot elevated Bulgarian.
Yeah.
Do more of them, probably because I myself find them so hard.
Right.
How does the left knee feel? So you're loading obviously the leg that's doing the squat, but
Correct,
the left leg being up
Mm-hmm.
and off the ground, just loading that right leg more, or is what's you feel like a stretch on the left? I'm gonna have to try it.
Yeah, so
It makes
there's,
it harder on the.
it increases the demand. So by elevating the back foot, we're increasing the demand on the front leg because you're taking out that stability
This is
component,
true.
right?
Yep. Okay.
You're also getting a slight rectus and psoas stretch
Yeah,
in there
I
as
see
well.
that. Okay.
Depending on the level of elevation that you choose, that can be
Okay.
increased or decreased.
Okay.
You know, definitely.
It's like hard, it's not
It's pretty difficult, but using the straps make it a little bit
Sure.
easier.
Yeah.
Another one that, you know, at Dina's that we've kind of came up with, and I'll face this way. So it's progression coming in with the kettlebell, and now we're working multi-planar, right? So we're coming sagittal, and then we're working coronal, so we're resisting that lateral flexion. So I like to set it up contralateral arm leg. We call this offset, right? Knee here, and maintaining that elbow position, resisting that lateral flexion, and just squatting up.
How many pounds is that, Bill?
This is 20.
Funny.
You probably had to dust it off because it doesn't get used.
I can't even think of one person that could even possibly do that.
Do you with those always start in that
You could do a
like
light
that
knee
full
squat.
versus starting kind of like, you know, so like this,
Starting at
and
the
then
top
going-
range?
Yeah, yeah.
So what I've found through like training people and implementing this in their training is if I have them start up here, getting into the position is a lot harder, and they're gonna have to really
yeah, there's a
focus.
lot of like, oh, gotta go closer, oh, gotta go farther,
Precisely.
jumping around to get there. Yeah, yeah.
That way, if it's you know, you're starting here in this end range of motion, it's a little bit easier. Then again, right, if they don't have that range of motion in their hips, you could always throw a pad underneath, elevate the knee a little bit. That way you get to like 90 degrees instead of right here, right? So if I was to
Yeah.
throw a pad under, start just a little bit higher, right? It's gonna be slightly easier to get into this position.
And you like the pad under your toe more just for the positioning and kind of the cushion through the
Yeah,
toe.
it's
That's
a lot
always
more
a funny
comfortable.
thing with like a bench at the gym is like,
hurts
do
the
I go
foot.
like
Hurts your
this?
foot.
Do I go like this? Yeah,
Yep.
depending on how my ankle or my toe is or something like that.
Definitely. So that was the
I've never done it from the full kneeling position before.
Well, I'm impressed that you do it. So there you go.
It's few and far between. Those are the days when I want to win.
So yeah, that was the Bulgarian progression. I am gonna need a chair for this one actually.
Now let's
What kind of chair?
Just a regular one. I'll grab. I
Here,
got
take this one, right here, right here.
I got it.
What is
It's a good bundle of energy.
So,
Yeah, it is. Jesus.
Thanks after me,
1 rep max.
huh? I think it's impressive I can do 1 rep of anything, right?
very simple sit to stand progressions, right? So coming in with the chair, just trying to gauge the distance here,
This is a good one. I use this
right? So if someone's having trouble and they're kind of using their hands to get up, and you don't want them to do that, you want them to go, without
Right.
hands. That kind of middle ground, right? You can make a compromise, use the TRX, get the upper body involved, right? So baseline progression, just using the upper body, making it a little bit more difficult, right? Have them pull halfway through that range of motion, have them sit back a little bit, and obviously pull and stabilize through the TRX. But now you're getting that isometric contraction of the quad on the concentric, fully extend, eccentric on the way back down, same thing, and then back here.
Nice.
That's a good one for a lot of our folks.
Yeah.
And I think that's very applicable to, like
Yes,
my base that you
definitely.
see
Well,
here,
here, yeah.
the patient population. So, next one that I would think of for that,
Here's a good idea, because I usually sit behind them and I become the human chair. Remember the one that when dropped on me? I was like, God bless the quads, hell when they went down, but that chair would have been safer.
the chair is always a good move. And I mean, it's practical, right? Because when they're going to be doing this, what do they need it for? Sitting up from a chair. Next, thing that I would think for a progression. So, things that I saw through reading that SFMA book, Ways to Progress in Exercise is, moving the force away from the center of gravity, increasing load, increasing volume, etc. One that I liked was decreasing the amount of stability from the base. So depending on, again, the patient and the context, just simply adding the foam pad underneath, right? And making it so that their feet are decently close,
Yeah.
bringing them up, and then having them stand here, right? Working a little bit of proprioception, a little bit of balance, and then come down slow. Again, controlling with the TRX, coming to sit back down. So,
That's a good one.
I think that's a
Patients
pretty,
underestimate the difficulty of having the foam underneath your feet on that too.
I-
definitely,
You're
definitely.
like, oh, okay. Like,
They think it's nothing, and then they get on, it's like, whoa. Right.
Yeah, so my next 2 progressions from that would just be to add load, right? So either, using a kettlebell, directly medial, right? Just like this, or something like we talked about earlier. If you want to work one side at a time, sit to stand, offset here, right? Obviously do both sides. A little bit more difficult, again, resisting lateral flexion, engaging the obliques, working that frontal coronal line. So that was the sit to stand progressions. Move this out of the way here.
Nice.
Okay, so TRX kneeling side bend. So with this one, we are targeting the oblique and we're placing the TRX laterally to the body. So coming here, falling into this side bend, we're getting a stretch through this right-sided lat as well as QL, and then pulling back up with the top arm, kind of coming back to center, right? And you can really feel that down here in that lower right quadrant.
You feel the stretch and then you feel the,
That, yeah,
So you're doing a side bend.
exactly, with TRX assistance.
Right.
So, pretty simple one. I think that could be pretty useful. Obviously, if the knees are uncomfortable on the ground, grab an RX. I don't think it's going to increase the difficulty too much. But yeah, same thing. Coming in, and instead of, one thing that you can focus on is having them not shoot the hips out so much. We're trying to fall over and flex into that lateral side bend, as opposed to shooting the hips and kind of coming here and then pulling through. But that's more of a preference, what you guys are trying to go with on that.
do you feel like that could be either a step above or below, or just similar goal-wise to say like side planks? Because we tried side plank variation
Yeah.
with patients
I think,
all the time between oblique, shoulder, glute, things like that.
definitely, I think below. I think they would be less difficult.
There, yeah.
So kind of like a regression from a side plank that could be utilized for.
Like this was easier than a side plank?
I would say so.
Yeah.
Definitely. Because you get the assistance of the TRX, and I feel like for the most part, even with patients at Dean's practice, you know, we're having to modify the side plank where you're coming into that knee bent position,
Yeah.
and you're coming here instead of, you know, here,
Yeah.
or even coming up to here. Like I've never seen anyone do this at either practice, for the most part. So that could be a regression from the side plank, definitely. I like that a lot. Okay, so next one, supine TRX rows. All right, so there's two progressions to this. Obviously, you guys know this one. Coming here, starting with pronated hands, coming into neutral. All right.
Why do we
Yeah.
start with the pronated hands?
That's just more of a preference for me, kind of like somewhat. I guess this would be,
Yeah.
Run an external rotation.
yeah. And that's just the way I've always done it. I mean, I guess like if you had a patient who had like some type of shoulder impingement, maybe you don't want to get as much motion in there. You just keep it neutral the whole time.
It's almost like a relative external rotation though, as you pull back, right? So
It is,
you
it kind
could-
of load the biceps. a
Yeah,
little bit
yeah,
more
you can
as you
kind of,
kind of-
yeah.
I mean, I've always done it in neutral because I was start like in neutral because I figured it's safer for me to reproduce it and I can remember. But,
Yeah.
but I thought there was something, you know.
I mean, potentially more brachialis activation, right?
Is it, I was gonna say, when you do it, like if you did it, when you did
Yeah,
it to
biceps,
bicep work,
yeah.
would you ever start like and do this kind of thing?
Yeah. So I mean, different like type of bicep workouts definitely changing from supination to pronation
Yeah.
via through
And what
neutral.
are you emphasizing then when you do that?
So just, you know, hitting those different heads. So coming here, right, in neutral, or if we start even supinated, you get more of that medial head,
Okay.
and then you turn in, you get more of the brachialis, and then you come up, you can get
Okay.
way more, and then kind of lowering down there. Different variations hitting different head types. It's a more comprehensive approach, like a bicep curl.
Gotcha.
And you know, just going off that, even coming into like a bicep curl variation here, starting with the hands pronated,
Those
Yes.
are really hard.
coming up to supinated.
That's what I was talking about, so
Okay.
that just kind of,
Yeah,
just getting the different heads of the biceps. Gotcha.
precisely.
That's something that's probably really useful too, I'm thinking in terms of epicondylitis, where I don't
Sure.
do a lot of, I don't ever use the TRX with that, that's making me think for, depending on the level of patient, just trying to load everything kind of through
Yeah,
the
I
elbow
think.
there between because I'll give them like hammer curls, pronated
Mhm.
curls, supinated curls, depending on what we're going at there, but I like that idea.
And it's honestly not super difficult, and it can be regressed pretty easily, right? So, I mean, if you just start here, as opposed to like out here, right? All you have to do is just come in, and it's pretty light resistance there, because your body weight isn't really coming into it, whereas opposed to if you're all the way down
Right,
here,
right.
and now you're coming up, it's gonna be a decent amount harder.
One rep max. Let's
Moving on the
go.
floor.
So that was that. The next progression from that, what I would do, obviously, is elevate the feet. I don't really think it's too applicable to the patients that come in here, but I just wanted to put that out there. So, you know, obviously, that would be the most difficult progression because you're directly parallel to the ground. But, you know, for me, with people
And
that
you're
I've
gonna show
seen,
me that.
I can, yeah, we'll show you.
Yeah, we need to see you do it.
Okay.
Because none of us are getting on the floor, maybe Lauren.
No. I think I understand what he's going for, but I do not trust myself, Jack.
So I'm gonna need to move these. All right.
This is the ultimate hard progression.
Yeah.
That would be correct, yes.
You
So
could
coming.
do this also in theory with a bar, right?
Oh yeah,
Set in a squat rack, that's what I'm envisioning.
Yeah, inverted
Not that
rows.
we have one of those either, okay.
those are
Yeah.
awesome. I love inverted rows. So similar concept with the hand placement, right? So first thing you're doing, a little bit of hip extension, and then you're pulling through.
Oh, man.
And this is getting some good snappiness right here as well. Right?
Yeah, let's put the cupcakes on, I'm using for a bench.
So-
That is fabulous.
The only difficulty I see with that one, I don't know how much you're gonna be using then, especially the headspace, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
for me, I like to position my body, preferably, you know, directly under it.
Yeah.
But in order to do that, you need to move this out. So yeah, I don't think it's too applicable. Then again, you know, depending on the a client, and you know if they're relatively high level, to try it out. You just need to be careful of the head. That'd be my main primary concern.
7 years of bad luck.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Don't break into the mirrors, yeah.
Okay, so
Nice.
next thing, TRX wise that I looked at was just a simple reverse fly. So you could pair this one with the anterior chest fly. So coming here, working in that T motion, right?
I like that, yeah.
Similar to
Yeah.
you know what we just did, the row, right? Decrease level of difficulty, get a little bit more upright. Come in here, all right, and then you can pair that with either a chest press or a chest fly. So controlling that eccentric, right? Come in here, and then bring it in and push. So that'd be kind of an easier progression as opposed to coming here and then getting that kind of medial deviation of the chest there. Because then you're getting here, you bring it in, and you get more tricep, and you can push through anterior delt as opposed to just solely like pec major, you know, working there.
I can do that.
TRX push-ups, I think, are super hard.
They
Yeah. Exactly, yeah, the TRX push-up, exactly, good
Can
pair.
we see that? Are you doing that one?
Sure, we can do that one. I didn't want to try like the basic ones. I didn't really want to include because I want to give you guys stuff that is
Yeah.
mostly new that you can use. And I know you guys are physical therapists, so obviously, like, I don't want to bore you with stuff.
No, these are definitely things we don't do a lot of,
Sure.
the higher
So-
level ones especially.
Yeah, higher level, right? Come in here. You can either go in neutral, slightly pronated, right? I like to keep it as close as I can to the sternum for pressing level. And I like to keep the elbows kind of locked into that 45-degree angle, kind of set the scap in a little bit better of a position, similar to when you bench press, right? You don't want to flare the elbows out. I know for me in my labs, I was always taught when we bench, we kind of bring it out to that 90-degree angle. But based on my, you know, subjective experience and things that I've just seen, I find it better to kind of get a little bit of thoracic extension, kind of tuck the elbows into 45, set the scap, depress, retract, and then get a good base to press from. So using a similar mindset here, right? Coming in, depress the scap, retract, tuck the elbows, come and press, as opposed to simply just flaring out to the side. And
Less strain in the shoulder.
yeah, you get way less.
I
anterior
start
delt.
like that, like I tell them, you know, do the ski jump in the Olympics. So I start like that and then push through and that's about the rest I can for sure. But that's, you know, good technique is much better. I
Yeah.
like it.
I mean, you always try to do these little things over time that I feel that make the biggest impact. Like for me, when I started working out, started benching, I did do that flaring type technique, and then I had to look into it more because I was getting shoulder problems, and this was like
Yeah, exactly.
7 years ago. You know, I've since fixed it, and then kind of applied that through coaching kids on the team at college. And I was like, listen, this is how you got to do X, Y, and Z. Just simple, the 3 kind of core type lift, squat, bench, deadlift. But
Okay.
digressing from that, TRX hamstring curls. Okay, so starting in supine, I might see if I can. I don't know if this is as low as it goes. If it is, not a problem.
You should be able, I think I've done similar before, you should be able to get enough length
Cool.
out of those.
But
yeah, they can
You can
go
drop them.
They can go longer.
Yeah, grab onto
Just,
the
that.
clip.
Yeah, they don't have like the teeth the way some of the ones that Jim do, but.
Just open it and pull.
I think you're
But,
going,
oh,
I think you are. I think you are.
I feel jazzed up.
There we go.
Some of the ones have like.
Got it.
Got it.
You should have eaten Russian glucose.
I'm afraid to eat it before we interview somebody.
Awesome.
That should be a little bit more. I think reasonable in terms of length.
Yeah, thank you.
She didn't freeze in the parking lot.
So
Oh.
get back to like TRX, just simple hamstring curls. So what we want to do here is you want to set the feet in these loops as opposed to setting them right into the.
Is that what those loops are for?
I would assume so.
I didn't know
People
you
put their feet in there and they have to do push-ups with their legs on.
Yeah,
How do you do
yeah.
that?
Right. So coming in here.
If I have to show somebody, I can't give them the exercise because I would have to show them.
setup is a little.
You've got to be like
I don't think I
doing
can
like
get into
several
it. I know,
exercises in
I'd
your
be
position.
tipping over.
Yeah.
Forget it.
If you can get
I'd
into
be
it.
like.
So maybe not be. It might not be the most applicable thing, but
Yeah, no, some people have done these and.
You can do one-legged ones, what's wrong with that?
you could.
He's in.
So
So it's around the Achilles.
yeah. Again, extending the hips, and you can either come 2 legs at once, or you go one at a time.
I kind of like that.
Right.
The hard thing too with that is depending, I think, on the straps, and I think ours are actually better than some of the ones at the gyms because they're just not used all day long. But you have to be like, if it starts kind of exactly like adjusting on you side to side, you know, if one foot drops as you lift the other, just based on the tether on the rope, I mean, it just changes the stability game a lot.
Sure.
So you're saying that our straps are good?
Yes.
Of course.
Wouldn't
So
expect
that was
anything less.
pretty cool.
Well, I was gonna say, or
Lifted
repair.
and
No, ours are better than
Yeah,
that.
and I think that could be used for hip extension too,
I love
right?
it.
If you can get them into the position.
Wow, we have a good laugh.
Yeah.
Our total hips.
If you can show, if you can get, well, you'd have to get them.
How
Things
am I
he's
get on
doing
the
it
floor
himself.
before you leave
You
me? I
think
get them
about it,
down.
if you're on the, if they're
I put them on that mat.
and you get their feet in it,
Yeah.
the hardest thing Nick
How
had
about
to do
one-
is get
you
his
put-
feet in it.
Yeah, but if
himself,
I'm laying
right?
on the mat and I put your foot in
That's-
one
I just
one
said the
leg.
same thing, yeah, if you get them in, it's easier.
Let me just make sure it's working now, okay.
definitely test out
Yeah, it could be
before.
doable. Just to make sure that we don't have to
The last, I think these are my last 2 or 3 for the TRX. So coming into just simple TRX, tricep extensions. Again, starting in this pronated hand position, and then, you know, or even starting supinated, right? Just come in here. Again, you want to decrease the difficulty of the exercise, get a little bit more upright, fall into it, extend back, increase difficulty, get back a little bit, slightly decrease that angle of, you know, torso to ground, then extend there. I would say I prefer that as opposed to the pronated grip. And that's just a simple preference. I think that by doing the supinated variation, I get a little bit more activation of that medial tricep head. So as opposed to coming here, it's a little bit easier. So I guess this could be like somewhat of a regression from that supinated version.
That's easier.
That
Yeah.
looks easier.
So
What about just neutral?
neutral,
One more thumb, yeah.
yeah, so we can try. It's a little bit weird because
Yeah,
the
it's
straps kind of
automatic.
force you to come in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't
Um,
wanna happen that way, yeah, okay.
I mean,
I just was wondering.
if you were to come here, right, and then you lock in the thumbs, kind of hook grip it, and then come and extend, that could be a neutral type progression.
Yeah, just curious.
That's what that alone would just be really hard on your
Oh,
grip
it is,
strength, yeah.
it is, yeah, for sure.
Let alone the triceps.
Okay, so getting back to the chair, one thing that I, saw from Dina and I really liked was that kind of hinge sit to stand variation for unilateral glute activation and development. So taking into consideration the TRX, right? I'll show it to you guys first here. So what you want to do is have whatever glute you're focusing on, have that opposite leg kind of out a little bit, almost like a modified single leg RDL, and slight hinge of the hips, right? Coming in here, and just sitting back and out as opposed to directly down, because then we'd be getting quad. If you're sitting back and you're hinging, right? Getting to about here, and then coming up, you're getting way more glute as opposed to quad out of that. So just changing the angle and the way that you go about the exercise can change the way that, what you're targeting essentially. So the regression to that is kind of, in my opinion, more applicable to the patients here, would be to utilize the TRX, similar setup and position, okay? But now we're using the assistance of the arms. So just finding that kind of tension level, all right? Same thing. So if you're going for right glute, left foot forward, kind of sitting back, controlling that eccentric, right? So you can do a little bit of a tempo here with the patients. Really have them control that eccentric. Slight tap, and then pull up. And you could even just, like similar to the calf stretch type of concept, you could even just do that eccentric type of loading, and none of the concentric, right? So you have an eccentric load, eccentric load, eccentric load, hinge, 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 stop, right? Bilateral stance and TRX if they really need to be regressed, but you still want to hit that glute in that sense. So yeah, that was what I had for that.
Thank you, I'm doing my thing here.
You haven't even got your face yet.
The last thing I had with the TRX was the TRX YTWs. So again, progression would be to increase or decrease the angle of torso to ground. Progression would be to get a little bit more upright. So for the purpose of demonstration, I'm going to be somewhere in between. So coming into the Y, okay, coming into the T, and then coming into the W. All right. So not super hard.
Can you do the YTW again? Did you say that?
Definitely. Y.
So it's,
Yep. T. And then W. Right. So again, if you have someone who's pretty regressed in terms of like ability to perform exercise, you can even stand behind them and help them through. And even if you want to push them into that or help assist them through that concentric range, and then have them control the eccentric, right, coming down on their own, and now you assist them through that concentric here, and then have them eccentrically tempo load them on the way down, and then same thing with the W. That I think that would be a progression from, you know, the Swiss ball, physio ball type YTW with the dumbbells, and that's just based on my kind of subjective type experience with it. So moving into non-TRX stuff, the first thing that I had was simple core progressions in quadruped. So the first thing that I wanted to implement was kind of this bird dog variation that I learned in a physical therapy clinic that I went to back in the fall. Kind of working that oblique sling, right? So getting the placement of the foam pad, you might want to use one that's a little bit more stiffer than this, but directly inferior to that knee, coming in, and this is more of a static hold as opposed to some like dynamic action. That's a little bit more difficult. I don't know if most people here are going to be able to do that. You're just focusing on like simple cueing, right? So focusing on getting that core tight and, you know, keeping that pelvis kind of neutral, not having them rotate too much, and then you're getting obviously that lower trap kind of activation through this arm flexion here. And just something simple as like 10-second holds each way, you know, can be pretty beneficial. And this is a decent amount more difficult than a simple, you know, quadruped arm and leg extension. The next thing I wanted to do is actually going to grab this band from over here.
it's hard.
But if someone's having difficulty, right, with, you know, that simple kind of quadruped arm and leg extension, according to the SFMA book that I was reading, adding a little bit of biofeedback via the tubing could be beneficial. So coming in, kind of wrapping the tube so that it's around your feet, all right? Making sure it's not going to slide up. And then all you're doing is getting into that kind of opposite contralateral arm and leg extension here, holding it. You can even go into a few reps. So with this, I would like to hold it for about 10 seconds and then maybe do about 5 reps each way. And that'll kind of help them, you know, potentially understand the movement a little bit better, although it is a more difficult progression. So if someone is, you know, very globally strong and able to perform the regular bird dog, but, you know, they're a motor more in the sense that they can't really get the concept of it, maybe a little bit of biofeedback via the tubing could be assistive in that sense. That was my thought process on that. So that covers the quadruped. So then, in regards to dynamic core strengthening and stability, all right, so the banded Palloff press, I'm gonna get this stuff out of the way. All right, gonna loop this around just a few more times. Just go like that. So, the initial variation that I've kind of been doing around here and implementing my own training, right? So contralateral arm leg, right? We're kind of inducing that knee valgus, but resisting into varus. So we're working anti-rotation, we're working into knee varus, and then we're pressing, increasing the distance of the resistance to the center of mass, and then coming into a little bit of upward rotation. So I would call this the kind of baseline type progression of this exercise, right? And then my kind of next thought in order to progress it, again, I don't know how many patients are gonna be able to do this, but if you add in a slider component, get a little bit more, activation of that quad and stabilization. So if we're coming here, we press out, and then we slide down, we're resisting an anti-rotation. We're also getting quad activation here, and we're resisting knee valgus. And now the tough part is coming back up, right, on that concentric portion there. So I like to go laterally. You could go in the sagittal plane here, right? This is a little bit easier of a variation. Again, another way to make it even harder, press up, overhead, and then come down, right? So just different variations of that, playing with reps and tempo, volume, right? So one thing that I know Dina likes to do is to kind of hold, right? For example, hold it for about 10 seconds. Then you can go to like 5 or 10 reps. And then something that I like to do is just, increase the demand on the core and then come through here. So there's a lot of different things that you can do in order to progress that exercise. But I find that kind of multi-planar type training has, at least for me and the people that I've implemented it for, whether it be in like warm-ups or just for general kind of core development in the horizontal or transverse plane, has been pretty beneficial. So I went through the banded upward chop and the press and lateral glide. All right, so I did the dynamic repetitions. I would say I would call this one a regression from what I just did, but I know I showed, I've used this one with Barbara, and I think that you liked it for a few of your patients. So the simple Palloff press into rotation, and you can follow through with the head. Again, you could hold here for about 10, come back, press it out for 10, and then hold. Or you could, similar thought process, hold for 10, right, and then come back and count the reps as the rotation as opposed to the presses. Again, different ways.
What's the point of doing the hold first and then asking for the concentric?
So for me, doing the hold first, the whole purpose of kind of core training is to increase the kind of efficiency of those type 1 motor fibers, so those slow twitch muscles, because when it comes to core development, it's more of an endurance-based kind of goal, right? So by adding in that rotational static hold, we're developing those type 1 fibers first and foremost, and then we're getting into more of that type 2 type range, strengthening those, being a little bit more comprehensive in the approach.
That was an excellent answer, and you did, that was just, I was just fishing you out, and that was absolutely dead on perfect.
I'm actually sweating now.
I saw that.
Yeah, well,
But that was absolutely perfect. That was,
And you're gonna have to like repeat all these things later by yourself facing the other direction because you've just done it all. Facing us right now.
So another thing that I've seen in the practice used a lot is kind of that kneeling ball plus like rotation. Something that I think could be beneficial as well, and for a wide variety of patients. because I don't think it's too difficult, is getting the feet up, right? So a little bit of hamstring activation, getting that pelvic tilt, engaging the core, pressing, right? And again, you could hold for 10, go through that same concept, press, or to challenge yourself a little bit more, increase the difficulty of the exercise, come up into rotation here, hold, and then you could just literally do like a 3 by 20 to 30 second hold each way, or you could come up over here, right? This is a little bit regressed from this variation, but still pretty difficult and different from here.
And even with the ones I got like like a half kneel, and I did that one against the wall, because I got us all mixed up over there, but it really was working when the patient couldn't stabilize. I had one leg up, one down, and I had them against that wall when they went to fall over. It was great, you know.
So you're getting the wall support out
Yeah,
of
I
it
was
too.
doing to start, because I couldn't
Right.
do without it, but I just had to in that, you know, line, and it worked, Are you gonna show, this one crazy exercise that Dina showed you for serratus? Remember
I was
that?
just thinking of that.
Yeah, cause that was a really cool exercise.
I would have to, okay, so you know what? Let me grab another band right now, and I'll set it up on the elliptical.
Well, he's grabbing that. Renee and I were kind of talking. What are people's thoughts on the bungee system? Renee and I's only fear is we don't know what the life expectancy of these loops are.
I mean, I gotta tell you, we'll just buy them for $16 or $19, cause, I mean, when I saw that, I was looking online, some magazine when I first saw it, and then Dina had already known it when we bought them, but, our therapy and usage is going down, cause I hope you're all telling people to go buy them.
Yeah, I'm wondering if we just get into like a every 6 months routine then, because
Yeah, and
I
you
just don't want it to snap on somebody. and
Yeah, so
be like,
just check them, you know,
Talking
like
about
always
bands,
have a
for sure.
backup, you know, I mean, we could buy 3 extra sets, and that way if one on one color didn't look good, throw it out and put in a new one, like sometimes the clips start to bend a little
Let's
bit.
start to break, otherwise we go up a little bit and get a slightly more expensive set for $20 or $30.
Yeah, if it's
Maybe
anything
better
better,
quality,
absolutely, you know, if
We
there's
could
a.
try, let's order 2 different kinds and see which one we like, that have the same strengths.
Yeah,
Or
and then,
maybe go
but
one
this
to
one for
higher.
a patient,
This is great for patients.
These are good for patients.
Right.
Yeah,
so
we're
I think if you
we're
want
just thinking something that gets so much
that's used in here,
Yeah,
I would
bring the
clearly,
clips
so
so that-
leaving this
This
one in the
handout.
office so you can show
Yeah,
them
I
and
like
then what they're gonna have, but then for us to up it, because it's a great idea,
That's
it's
what
a
we're
great
thinking.
idea, right?
So
I
let's
think,
define expensive, maybe strength
Yeah.
up.
Thinking about like things that you guys can invest in for the office, even like a simple, you know, weighted vest, like 20 pounds, and just throwing that on a patient as opposed to having them, you know, have to use all these dumbbells where the resistance is farther away from the body. The weighted vest actually decreases the difficulty of the exercise, but you're still getting that increased load and demand. So for something like a simple sit to stand or like single leg stuff, I think it'd be
Puts a
very,
vest on?
yeah. And I know Mike Boyle tends to use that a lot with his training. Like deficit single leg squats with weighted vest and chains. Obviously not as applicable here, but something worth thinking about.
Does the vest come only one, it's like typical 20 pounds, do they come lighter or heavier?
It depends on the brand. If you go to Dick's, I had like a 20-pound one in the past, but you can adjust it via the sandbags in it. So,
Kinda like some of the ankle weights you can,
What are we talking about? Is that
we're
different?
weighted vest
Oh.
for like usage in the office. Something up to like 15,
Like
20
our little
pounds.
bitties, I'm thinking, you know, when you're doing, like I do the sit to stand on this because they can get activated, I do this, and then I give them a 5-second hinge on the way down for the eccentric, but
Right.
what if we did that and put a 20-pound vest on them?
Yeah, and right.
Flip foot bowling.
Instead of having them have to hold a kettlebell, which could be a little bit more difficult, you just have the
Right.
vest. It's like
Let's
they're
put the vest on.
You writing those down? Weighted vest and
Weighted vest and resistant.
it's a higher level resistance weights.
But
That's okay.
coming into the serratus punch, right? So if you're gonna set it up on the elliptical here, maybe getting into that lunge type position, and
This is a
then
very cool exercise.
Okay.
pressing, pronating, and then externally rotating.
oh, yeah, saw that.
So the key is to externally rotate right
The top
up
of
and
the
into
leg,
it.
right?
So you're pushing
Exactly.
out,
Yep. So you're pushing,
So this
protracting.
is serratus punch.
The SA
you
punch.
Yes.
punch, and then you're coming up and lifting. Just going.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, it's a serratus punch with a rotation at the end with the resistance of
So,
the band.
could you do that in, like, for the one that we do, I'm trying to think of, in the, from your hands and knees in quadruped, where we do the slide lift, that look like a band?
Yeah, so I'm trying to think. If you were to come, maybe let me switch this with the tubing,
How they do this at home.
You know, one thing that I liked that I kind of implemented at the gym is, because I don't have tubing like this, I'll take like a regular band and then place dumbbells here and then have the band come around, and then I'll do a little bit of a tabletop. This is actually one that I had listed as well, on a little bit of tabletop, right? So a little bit of a plank position and then alternating extension, but similar thought process. Just get out of the tabletop and then getting the band here, coming up, and I guess you're already kind of externally rotated, so all you have to do is just focus on the protraction aspect of it,
Okay,
right? So you're still getting low trap out of it,
okay.
as well as some, I would say serratus, maybe just not as much, because you're in a different kind of position, you're more parallel to the ground. But definitely the biggest thing that I would feel out of that subjectively is low trap and then anterior delt.
And we can get more, I mean, that was from some course I had gone to, that it was, I know, that was some course, thought it was a great idea, I tried it, the course, loved it, got the purple, thought that was good, and then we never bought more, and then Dina started using it more, and then I said, should
We
we
had a
get?
couple that got rubber rotted, so they went.
So, but then we didn't, but that particular one was the most expensive one, but we can buy, if you think you want more colors for different ranges. But I will tell you, you know, I have a patient with a dislocation, the most wretched humeral fracture I've ever in my life seen. She fell in the tub, wrenched her arm back, dislocated it, and smashed everything. And it's a wreck. And she needs to be independent, and she couldn't reach to put a dish up, she couldn't reach, and so this rotator cuff tearing, I've got muscles that aren't working, and I had to kind of figure out a new plan, and I was trying to use that towel rack as where the dishes were up and try to figure out how far we were. And then I was trying to do a serratus punch, and I was trying to get myself in a mess. Patty Simpson.
Yes.
And then you said you had just learned this exercise with Dina, and we tied it up. Yeah, and we were using the bike and the pole, and so I just had her holding on and punching with a resistance, right? Because she's overweight and she's not doing all that quadruped stuff, right? So we started doing that, and then we threw some extension in, and then I kept working it,
Yeah.
and then you were shocked because within 2 weeks,
It was literally
not
like
only
overnight,
for the
almost.
test came, you know, like, can you get to the first, because she couldn't hit with that rack, because I took all the things off, pretend these, and I took a 2-pound weight in your hand, this is the plate, these are your plates, get them up on the thing, and use serratus. And I kept saying, like, Shock, put your plate up there. Who cares what muscle you use at this point, you wanna be independent, right? And you walked in that day and she went above the whole thing.
I was shocked.
I know,
Yeah.
and
Is this
it
the
was
patient
just,
that you're doing the coat hanger on there too?
and then I was doing the coat hanger,
Yeah.
right, and that little loop was really great, it's the coat hanger, you know, like with the hanger, trying to get it in there for dexterity and trying to get these shoulder people to be functionally oriented. But I will have to say that the deal of why I like this particular thing is that all the other serratus punches, I don't know what it is, but they just don't seem to make a big change for me. But when that muscle was turned on effectively in this particular area with the rotations and all the rest of it, it recruited and came back so fast.
How'd you get her to do it at home? How did you hook it up?
She's got the TheraTubes, and she tied them up, I think it was from
So she was working at home a lot then.
yeah, through the chairs and the doorways, you know, she shut the door, right,
Versus
and then,
behind her doing
yeah,
it.
and it really, and the first time we did it, we had her kneeling, we were in a half kneel,
Yeah.
we were trying, and then I said, you know, let's screw the half kneel, I mean, who needs
Yeah.
that, I mean, she didn't need that, right, I mean, it was making it a lot harder, but I
Yeah.
didn't wanna get it, so I think that's the
Just
only
wanted
thing I'm
to-
gonna give you, the whole sports line, is sometimes in pathology, we get so like multi-planar and recruitment,
Yeah.
and we're gonna get a million muscles going, and I wanna say, hold the boat, you know, start with one thing, cause actually, it was so distracting, by getting more core and multi-plan, that I was losing serratus. I was saying, I said, get up, stand up, and let's go for one muscle, 1,000 points of stimulation on serratus until we wake this thing out of the coma. And then progress into the multiplex. Sometimes we get carried away with giving, let's stand on your head and blink your
Yeah.
eye and pat your stomach and jump up and down and do the exercise. I'm like, maybe old school, maybe do the exercise, find the muscle, figure out what to do, and then, you know, get those progressions coming in. But it was a very cool exercise. I really think that, the external rotation at the end of the range, you know, it was the punch and then do that at the very end. And remember that it's not just about, it was the recruitment, that her brain and her body couldn't figure it out until they figured it out. And
Yeah,
once they got
yeah.
recruited, she woke everything up, and it was, she came in here, even I was like, pretending not to be shocked to shit, but I was. You know, I mean, that arm was,
Yeah.
whoop, you know, I'm thinking,
I
how
think
did
it
we
was
count, right?
definitely less of like, I mean, obviously, strength had a part to play in it, but it was more like neural recruitment of that fiber.
Absolutely, nothing happens that quick without the neuro, right? So,
Yeah.
But I would just say that, but we didn't think about doing it while we were there, we were like doing some community thing over there.
Yeah,
right
yeah,
there,
yeah.
you know. But that would work, you know, and even I'm thinking like, you know, even our little bitties, you know, you sit them in the chair right there, and you know, these shoulder rotator cuffs that have nothing, that does nothing, use serratus. If you can't get the cuff, we gotta go after the deltoid, we gotta go after serratus, and I think that's the other thing, is to think about, you know, who can you trade off of, and who can you train to do the job, because I think in the world of pathology, all this is great with wellness.
Yep.
But in the world of pathology, when things, all of a sudden, you just don't have that.
Yeah.
So what are you gonna do when you live alone, and you can't reach anything? Yeah, I mean, these are problems, so I think that things like that work out great.
Yeah, kind of selecting and focusing on one particular muscle as
Yeah, and
opposed to the
just being very, you know, function.
The next kind of, you know, not to completely go against what you just said, but the next exercise I was going to show is
What,
is
multiplanar, hit your head in the dance, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So a little, I guess you could call it like 3-for-1. So coming here, we're actually going same leg, same arm, bringing it out, externally rotate, flex, right? And then you can hold here. Or what you can do is come and get into a little bit of a squat. And then to make it even, you know, a little bit slightly more challenging, add a little bit
Slightly challenging enough.
medial resistance, increasing the demand on knee varus, so resisting valgus. Externally rotate, hold here, flex, and then just hold. And you can time. Again, high level patience. Progression would be drop the weight. Next progression would be just externally rotate. Progression from that would be just hold. So.
I have a patient.
Did you finish?
Oh yeah, that was that.